Hi, it's Mrs. Arn again. I'm here today to teach you how to make a simple loaf of bread. Okay, so it's just called beer bread, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Here's the recipe, just so you can see it and take a look at it, but I will explain to you all the things that I'm going to do, step by step, all the ingredients, but I just want to make sure you had a clear idea about what the recipe was. Okay, so the first thing it says to do is preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So I'm going to do that first because I forgot to do that when we were making the cookies. Okay, so let's come over here to the oven, bake, and if I do the temp up button, there it goes, it sets at 350. Okay, so beer bread. Most bread is made with yeast, okay? But not everybody has yeast at their house. Yeast is one of those things that expires. So I only buy it when I'm gonna make bread. And otherwise I don't have it in the house. So I think that using beer, which has yeast in it, is a good substitute. Most people have a can of beer in their house, and it only takes one can. Most people can either get their parents or uncle or something to buy them one can of beer at a store to make this. I know it seems silly, but not everybody has yeast at home, and since beer is made with grains and yeast and water, then everybody has access to this. It's easier. This bread can be, and it makes one loaf, but it can be made from everything you have at the house. It isn't anything special, and when I make bread normally at Thanksgiving or Christmas, I have to buy packets of yeast, and with this bread I usually have all the ingredients at home. Okay, so the next thing it says to do is to grease our loaf pan. So I have a loaf pan here. It says to use a 9 by 5 by 3. That's just a regular loaf pan. I have a smaller one, and yeah, that you don't want to use the smaller one. That fits right inside this one. You want a bigger one. This bread sometimes doesn't get completely done in the middle, and if you used a smaller pan, it wouldn't get done at all. Okay, so you want to make sure you have a bigger loaf pan. All right, it says to grease the inside and use parchment paper. Now, I saved my parchment paper from when I did the cookies the other day, so I'm just going to use that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just got a little bit of a chocolate chip cookie on it still. And then I'm just going to use some butter. Now, one of the ingredients is a 1/4 cup of butter. That's 4 tablespoons. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll notice I have a whole tablespoon here that I'm going to cut off. And I'm going to use that to grease my pan. Okay, so if I cut that butter off, I don't need to worry about getting anything else. I'm going to take this foot. So I'm going to grease the bottom of my pan. Okay, just rub that butter around and up the sides. I know it seems really gross when you're using butter like this, but no big deal. I always keep a rag around when I'm doing my baking, cooking, anything. Okay, so I've got my pan greased. Set my butter aside and wipe my hands off. Okay, now it says to line the bottom of the pan with parchment paper. So we keep kitchen shears, always handy. You never know when you're going to need kitchen shears. All right, so I'm going to measure my pan. I know it doesn't have to be perfect, but that's just kind of get an idea here. I'll cut. Nice thing about parchment paper is it's very forgiving. So if I want to just press it into my pan, it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? And it can even go up the sides of the pan, no big deal. Now, I still have a little bit of that butter, so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to brush a little bit of that butter over the top of the parchment too, just to make sure that we've got it buttered. Okay, so my pan is ready now. My oven is on. So the next thing on my recipe then is In a medium bowl, I'm going to whisk together the flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. Okay, so I get my flour ready. I always keep it in the freezer. It doesn't matter if flour is warm or cold. It doesn't affect it at all because it doesn't freeze. Okay, so last time I was here, I taught you to scoop your flour, get it kind of heaping, and then you're going to level it off with a straight edge. Okay, so I'm going to do that with mine. I'm going to put it in my bowl. I'm just using a big mixing bowl. I'm not using my mixer this time because it says that to mix it by hand. So I'm just going to do that. All right, so that's 1, and I need 3 cups, so I'll get 2 more. Heaping, and I'm going to level it off. That's 2, and my 3rd cup. Okay, that's 3. Okay. Now I need 1 tablespoon of baking powder. So this was all-purpose flour that I used, not bread flour. Some recipes call for bread flour, but like I said, this can be made from all ingredients you already have at the house. So all-purpose flour and baking powder this time, not baking soda. So I'm going to do baking powder. I need a tablespoon, that's the bigger one, tablespoon of baking powder. Baking powder is really cool. The container has a little edge for leveling it off. So you do your scooping and you use your edge to scrape. There we go. Level tablespoon. Put that in there with my flour. Okay. Then I need 2 tablespoons of sugar. Here's my sugar. Okay. 2 tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to scoop my sugar in and level it off. 1, and it's easier just to dump it in here. Okay, and 2. 2 tablespoons, so the same measuring tablespoon of baking powder and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Now you're wondering, why do we put sugar in bread? The yeast in bread is activated by the sweetness, by the sugar. So not only do we have sugar in this one, but we also have honey. Okay, so I need 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put that in there too. Salt is really good with bread. It just adds an extra flavor to it. With the salt, I just dip it in. I get just regular old table salt, a teaspoon, level it off, and you're good. All right, now I'm going to whisk those together. So I'm going to use my whisk, and I'm just going to kind of whisk my dry ingredients together just to make sure that they are mixed. Okay, just want to make sure that powder, salt, sugar all get evenly mixed in there. All right, done with that. Okay, now it says to put in, we're going to add the beer and the honey. Okay, I'm going to need 2 tablespoons of honey. It's plenty warm in the house, but I'm going to just microwave this for a couple seconds just to get it a little bit soupier, but it doesn't really need it. All right, so I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of honey, so it's the same measuring. I'm going to pour my honey in. My favorite kind of honey, and I don't know if you know this, but different honeys have different flavors. My favorite honey is clover honey, so that's what I'm using. I like the clover honey. Some people like orange blossom. Some people like wildflower. I like clover. For some reason, that's my favorite. So 2 tablespoons of honey. Be generous. Just and put that in your pan with your flours, your dry ingredients. Okay, now I'm going to add my beer. Love honey. So I'm going to add my beer. I'm just going to pour it in. You have to pour slowly because it's going to foam anyway. But add your beer slowly. It doesn't have to be an expensive beer. It doesn't have to be a heavy beer. It doesn't have to be any kind of specific beer. All right, now I'm going to take my wooden spoon, and I'm going to mix it up. It says to use a wooden spoon to mix up your beer batter. You just want to get it all mixed up. There we go. Okay, scrape that bottom. Make sure you don't have any clumps of flour. I've got a lot of flour on the bottom. I want to make sure that all gets done. So now it kind of resembles a beer dough rather than batter. It's kind of coming together in sort of a ball. Okay, so I'm going to scrape off my spoon. Next step is to melt the butter. I have my 4 tablespoons, 1/4 cup of butter. I'm going to put that in a plastic measuring, because what we're going to do with this is we're going to pour some into our prepared pan. So I'm going to microwave this for about 30 seconds and I will come back and we'll finish this up. I'm back. I have microwaved my butter for 30 seconds. Now, it's not completely melted, but if you stir it around, it'll melt really quickly. And there we go. Okay, so 30 seconds. You don't want to like cook the thing to death. You want to make sure that it's just melted. Okay, it says to pour about half of this into my pan. So, straighten out my little paper there. I'm going to pour about half of that in to the bottom of my pan. I'm saving the rest. I'm going to swirl it around. Okay, now I'm adding my batter, my dough. I'm going to pour that into the pan and get all of it in there. I'm going to use my fingers to get the rest of the dough. This dough is really yummy. There's no eggs in it, so you know what? Try it. It's good. Okay, so I'm going to press my dough around, get it all kind of even into my pan. It will rise because of the yeast in the beer, and it will rise because of the baking powder. Both of those are rising agents. Put the rest of my butter on top of my batter. Batter and butter, I keep getting those mixed up. You're going to use a pastry brush, but if you don't have a pastry brush, just use your fingers, spread it around. You can see my my loaf doesn't look perfect by any means. It's very rough looking. That's okay. Those little peaks and valleys will get nice and crusty. Okay, so I spread the butter around. It is all set. My oven is ready. I'm going to bake. It says bake for up to 50 to 60 minutes, so almost an hour. Part of that time is it's going to use to rise. It's not going to get way big like a big loaf of bread. It will rise a little, and then it bakes. Now, I've had trouble with this getting done all the way in the middle, so I'm going to use like a cake tester or a big toothpick to see about testing it. But I'm going to put this in the oven, so let's go do that. Okay, so I'm putting it in the oven into the middle, right in there in the middle shelf. Okay, you can see, there we go. It's in there. I'm going to push it all the way back. And I'm going to set my timer for 50 minutes, and then I'll come back and check it. And then we'll see how it's doing, and we'll check it together and see how our bread turns out. All right, see you later. Fresh baked bread is one of the best smells in the world. Just making this loaf makes my mouth water. It smells so good. Okay, my timer has gone off. Turn it off and let's check it. So look at that lovely loaf. Oh my goodness, you see how pretty that is? That's beautiful. All right, now I don't think it's going to be done. Remember, I only set it for 50 minutes. It does say close to an hour. Oh, but it looks so good. Let's get my toothpick. Okay, it's actually a skewer. Use a big old skewer, and it should come out clean if it's done. It is a little bit doughy in there. I'm gonna give it, I don't know, maybe, see how a little bit sticks to it? I don't know if you can see that. I'm gonna give it maybe a couple more minutes. I want my top to be nice and brown. So I'm gonna go, say 3 more minutes. And see how that goes. All right. It smells delicious. And while it was baking, I cleaned up the whole kitchen. It's always a good tip. I hate doing it later because I want to have a slice of bread when I'm done. So I will check it in a few minutes and we'll come back and see if it's done. The timer's gone off. Time to check that bread again. I'm going to turn it off. Let's go see how it looks. I'm so excited. All right, let's get on in there. Look at that. Nice and golden brown. I'm going to test it again, but I'm pretty sure it's done this time. Go right down the middle. Looks like it comes out pretty clean. Okay, I'm excited. I'm going to take this bread over to my cooling rack. Again, I'm using the same cooling rack I did for the cookies. I've got the recipe right there. As you can see, I use this recipe sometimes. It's a little dirty. Get splatters on it. But that bread, doesn't it look good? Oh my goodness. I cannot wait for that to cool and have a slice. I hope yours turned out just as well. And if it is a little gooey in the middle, that's okay. Just toast up your slice and it'll be perfect. Enjoy it with a little butter. Sometimes a little sprinkling of salt makes bread taste even better. I'm excited for you to try this honey beer bread. Make it from ingredients you have already in your house. That's the nice thing about it. And, you know, just enjoy it. During this quarantine time, we don't always have everything we need. We don't always have bread flour. We don't always have yeast. So make this bread from things you already have in the house. I'm excited for you to try it. I hope you like it. Thank you.